Welcome to this video tutorial. My name is Michael Fiedler and I'm a member of the IBM FlashCopy Manager development team. This video is part of the best practice series for our product, and I want to demonstrate the different ways to restore a FlashCopy Manager backup with the different granularities. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to use the comment section below this video. FlashCopy Manager for VMware offers 4 ways to restore a backup, and all have different granularity. The instant restore of an entire data store is basically a disaster recovery in case the entire data store or the majority of the virtual machines are destroyed. This way of restoring completely overrides the data store if it's still existing on the ESX host, and rebuilds it in the setup like it was at backup time. Restoring a virtual machine can be used to reconstruct one or more virtual machines from a backup. The virtual machine can be restored to the original location or any other data store on the ESX host. Restoring one or multiple virtual disks can be used to permanently rebuild certain virtual disks that might have been destroyed by a disaster or any other failures. It will rebuild the virtual disk, and it can be attached to the original virtual machine or any other existing VM. The virtual disk is permanently accessible after the restore. If you want to restore single files or folders, the appropriate way is to attach certain virtual disks to an existing virtual machine, copy the files or folders, and detaching the backup again. This way of restoring is supposed to give access to the backup data as long as the backup is attached. Let's get started by taking a look at the data store and the virtual machines I'm going to backup and restore in this demonstration. There's a data store DS tutorial with 2 virtual machines, VM tutorial 1 and VM tutorial 2. VM tutorial 1 has 2 virtual disks with the size of 2 and 3 GB. VM tutorial 2 has only 1 virtual disk with 3 GB. Now I'm going to create a backup for this data store. Before starting the backup, let me quickly show you the device class I'm using for this demonstration. I have configured an SVC device class with dynamic target allocation using SSH key to communicate to the storage device. Now let's create a backup schedule to create the initial backup. Please follow the steps on the screen to see how to create and run an FCM backup operation. In the meantime, I want to give you some technical background about the granularity of an FCM backup. If you select a data store to be backupped, what FCM is doing is identifying all storage volumes that the data store resides on, and is creating a hardware snapshot for each of these volumes. That means the FCM backup always contains data for the entire data store. The reason for that is to be flexible in the way of restoring the backup. You can choose between instant restoring the entire backup or restoring certain objects out of the backup, like VMs or single or multiple virtual disks. To demonstrate an instant restore, I'm now going to delete our 2 VMs from the DS tutorial data store, then do an instant restore, and check back in the vSphere web client to see if those VMs have been restored. Now let's initiate an instant restore in the FCM GUI. Make sure you select data stores and then find the restore point for your backup in the list. Click Restore and then follow the steps I show on the screen. Let me give you some technical background again. For the instant restore operation, FCM is simply reverting the snapshots taken in the backup time for each of the storage volumes the data store resides on. That means we override all data that might exist on the data store to be restored. This operation basically is a disaster recovery of an entire data store in case the data store have been destroyed completely. Now let's go back to the vSphere web client to check the DS tutorial data store. As you can see, both VMs have been restored with their original virtual disks and settings they had at the backup time. To demonstrate restoring of a single VM, I'm going to delete VM tutorial 2 in the vSphere web client, then doing the restore and check back in the web client again. Now let's go back to the FCM GUI to initiate a restore of a single VM. Select virtual machines this time and select the virtual machine to be restored. Then find the restore point for your backup and select Restore again. Follow the steps on the screen to see how to start the restore operation. What FCM is doing in the background now is attaching the backup to the ESX host and copying over all the configuration files representing the virtual machine to be restored. It can be copied to its original location or to any other location you might have specified in the FCM restore GUI. Now let's go back to the vSphere web client to check out how the DS tutorial data store looks like. As you can see, VM tutorial 2 was restored with its original settings. Now let's take a look on restoring a single virtual disk. To demonstrate that, I'm going to power off VM tutorial 1, edit its settings to remove one of the virtual disks, then restoring it and attaching it to VM tutorial 2, and then check back in the vSphere web client to see how the VMs look like. In the FCM for VMware GUI, select Initiate Restore and select Virtual Machines again and find your virtual machine to be restored. Then click on Restore and select Perform Restore of a selected virtual disk. Find the disk you want to restore, in our case hard disk 2, and select the target virtual machine the virtual disk is attached to after the restore. In our case, I select VM tutorial 2. Follow the steps on the screen to see how the restore proceeds. What FCM is doing now is attaching the backup again to the ESX host and copying over the VMDK file representing the virtual disk. Then it's going to reconfigure the target virtual machine, in our case VM tutorial 2, to make that disk available. Now let's go back to the vSphere web client to see how our virtual machines look like. As you can see, VM tutorial 2 now has two virtual disks, its own original virtual disk and the one we just restored. To demonstrate the restore of a single file or folder, let's check out the settings for VM tutorial 1 again. As you can see, it still has only one virtual disk at this time. In the FCM for VMware GUI, again select Initiate a Restore, select Virtual Machines, and find the virtual machine you want to restore. This time select Attach. Select the hard disk you want to attach and specify the target virtual machine. In our case, it's the original virtual machine VM Tutorial 1. Follow the steps on the screen to see how this operation proceeds. FCM now will make this virtual disk available on the selected target virtual machine to make it possible to copy over any files or folders you want to restore. In the FCM for VMware GUI, this backup will be marked as attached, as long as you don't select the detach operation for this backup. Let's go back to the vSphere web client to see how VM Tutorial 1 looks like now. As you can see, our virtual disk hard disk 2 is available on the virtual machine and files can be copied over. That brings us to the end of this tutorial video. If you have any questions, feel free to use the comment section below this video. I hope you found the information useful, and I see you again in other tutorial videos.